All right.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so last week we were talking about one of the things that came up. Uh, Albert was speaking at first about, some of the different things that he was doing. I think that, yeah, that was in this group, I believe. And then we got into, I asked the question about what does everyone consider canon and different things like that. Um, and the reason I was asking and trying to figure it out is because when you have, and I think Professor Smith, you are, and Norman, you guys would be adherents to the documentary hypothesis, at least in some sense. Is that correct?
What's you mean? What are you talking about? The documentary hypothesis?
Yeah, JEPD. Would you subscribe to that idea? Where,
Documentary hypothesis.
yes.
Okay. Uh, Elucidate it a little bit.
Okay. So basically, the idea being that the Tanakh, Torah, Prophets, and Psalms, there are four different, at least four main sources that go into the making up of the Tanakh. So, I don't know what your raising was, but when I was raised in church, you go in and the Bible is the Word of God. It's inerrant, it's infallible, et cetera, et cetera. The first five books are all from Moses. And so the documentary hypothesis is that different parties with different agendas had a role in getting certain things into the Tanakh. And then as it went through, there were probably around the Babylonian exile, someone who I would peg as Ezra, but it could be whoever kind of compiled all these things together. That's why you have some doublet stories and some different things like that. And then out came what we know as the Tanakh. It's a much more different perspectives about Yah rather than a voice from Yah saying this is who I am, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so it sounds like the Bible, many people, different backgrounds, put together, and this is the document, what we call the scriptures today. And then I've heard that too, that there was some things in the Babylonian exile that impacted some of what we have today. As far as whether I subscribe to it, I subscribe to only this. That is that the Father is powerful enough and overarching enough to convey his message, even in the midst of some diversity of texts, and so on and so forth. I think we can find his will within what we have, but I think we have to look a little outside of perhaps what we were raised with. We need to be open to other sources and compare. And so I'm at that place right now.
Okay. No, and I would agree with you. Absolutely. I think that there's the thread of the Father's words throughout. And I don't actually think that it's somehow that the documentary hypothesis, the thing that happened was because, that the Father lacked the power. I think that he allowed it. So that it's like Yeshua says with the parables that you and Kepha says in the Clementine Recognitions, you speak in a certain way to a large group, so that in hearing, the people that have hearts to really follow the Father and not their own selfish desires are going to hear those threads and seek those threads out. So absolutely, I would agree with you there. So because of that, my question about whether or not last week saying what, and I put it up on one of the walls. Maybe I could put it up in the Yahad think tank, or maybe Allison could do that. I don't. Either way, like, what does everybody go to for canon? Because I think the problem can be that sometimes if we do have a text and we think that it has been tampered with and certain issues have been put into it, sometimes we're referring to that text to say, here, Yah says this, and other times we can be referring to that text and saying, oh no, that's an interpolation, that's an addition later, so we don't need to abide by that. And I think that can become a very scary proposition, because you can easily start getting into what you want it to say, and then it just becomes do what thou wilt, that is the whole of the law, which is a scary proposition. So going into it, you have to have these barriers, these check marks, if you will, on how to do that. So my first question was, who is going to what to see what's true doctrine? Are you just going to the canon proper? Are you going to these other texts? What are you going to? And then sometimes you'll hear somebody refer to a book and say, hey, this is Yah's word. And then they'll refer to the same book and say, no, this is an interpolation. So does anybody ran across that or feel that's the case or have any input about that?
Yeah, it's kind of a slippery slope once you start down that path. I know what you're talking about. When you start to question things and claim that they are not legitimate. And of course, you got sources that do come to war against things. So it's like, what is the truth, in all of it? And so I think while we do have to be wise about the fact that, there's some people, like you were mentioning, the King James, they're King James Bible only in the church, and we know that there's problems in the King James. So, but they ignore those things and say that that's that. I think that when we get to this level here, we begin to look outside that. But at the same time, we still have to have some kind of a unified code. Now, I've been asked the question, well, how do we tell what's scripture? Because I've been introducing different books like Jasher and the Jubilees and Enoch and the Didache and so on and so forth. What I told them is I just try to keep it simple and say, look, if it's upholding the messianic narrative, which is when you look at the 66 books, they do. For the main part, when it comes to concepts contained within, if it's upholding the commandments of our Father in heaven,
right,
to the Isaiah hermeneutic, to the Torah and to the testimony, and they speak
right.
not according to this word, there's no breaking of dawn in them. So those are two main things. As far as what all of the details that get filled in to that main hermeneutic, that's where the question. And even in the days of the New Testament. Look at what the Apostle Paul was talking about. He said, some follow Apollos, some follow Peter, some follow Paul. He's speaking of himself. Some follow Paul. Is Messiah divided? Or actually, he even mentions there's some who only follow the words of Yeshua. They won't follow even what the apostles write. But, he was distressed by this himself. And so we kind of run into this. I think in this latter day now with all these books that are being, that are readily accessible online. Yeah,
absolutely. And it was interesting last week when you brought up the Isaiah idea, because I've done a teaching on this, and I was going to probably revamp it. And so I was going to incorporate that Isaiah idea into it, because I started at a different place. You started at the Isaiah point. But I think the Isaiah point is factually correct, and that's another thing I was wanting to get. Well, there's two things now that you brought it up. Number one, we have Abraham, right, or Avram, and before he's Abraham, and he didn't have any books, right? So he's having to follow the Father. He's seeing that there's idol worship going on, and we all know the story, or maybe we don't, but have you heard the story about how he, showed his dad that following idols was stupid or whatever, and which is a great little nugget there. And he starts following Yah, and he doesn't do it perfectly, but he's coming out of, and if you have read Yasher, Sefer HaYashar, which is not the book of Jasher, it's actually, at the beginning of my copy, the guy points out that you're not going to have a hey in front of somebody's name. And so it's called, really, it should be translated the upright book, or the upright history, or the upright record, not the book of some guy named Yasher. But anyway, in there, it records, everything, all the evils that were going on, and that his dad was basically a lieutenant to Nimrod, and all of that stuff. And so when you see, in our world, one thing I always teach to people is if Yah is dealing with you about something, don't fight him. Not because for any other reason, in that there's probably a zillion things wrong with us. So if he's pointing out one of them, it's because he needs to deal with that one before he can get to the next one, etc. So if you're fighting him on this one, you're not going to get dealt with correctly. And then if you don't get dealt with correctly, your heart's not going to be as right, and you're not going to see the true path. And so, for us, part of the true path we're trying to see is to go to certain texts. Abram didn't have that. He was just, quote unquote, blindly following, in the sense of he had no external evidence other than what he heard the Father saying to him, which is not a bad place to be. The Father speaking directly to you, first guy in a while, because everybody's been horrible. But that being said, we're on the other side of this, and we're looking back to Avram. And that's one of the things that we can do, is look back to him and see what the mistakes he made and the things that he got right and different things like that. But when you have encompassed in our book, in our 66 books, that it says no one can see the Father, no one can see, in the Tanakh, no one can see Yod He Vav He, and live. And then it also says Yod He Vav He walked up to Avram, and they talked and they ate. So you have these differences, and but Deuteronomy, Devarim 18, talks about the idea that they ask, why do you allow false prophets among us? And he says, it is to test you. And so what better way, instead of having to have a physical false prophet, in each generation, which we do have, but you can have these books or these scriptures, these that are interspersed in between the correct things, so as to be a false testimony, who a bad heart is not going to see that they're false, and it's going to cause them to not see the light, which is very apropos, I think, to Yeshua talking about the idea of the wheat and the tares, right? So the Father sows the good seed, and then what? The evil one comes in and sows the bad seed to mix it up. The watchers say, hey, should we grab the bad seed out so that the good seed can be there? And he says, no, let's wait till the end of the harvest, where we can see who produces fruit and who doesn't. So the seed there in the parable that is explained is people, but people are influenced by the words that they hear. And that's what we started with last week. Your thought paradigm determines what way you will go. If you think, and I'm in Oregon, if you think that New York is north of you, you're going to start traveling on I-5 north, and it's just going to land you in Vancouver, right? But it doesn't matter how sincere you are about that feeling. It's not going to get you to New York. You've got to go east to get to New York. So your thought paradigm determines, and when I say thought paradigm, I'm not talking about brain. I'm talking about heart. Thought comes from the heart. The brain is just the transmitter of that thought. I coined a quote a while ago. I'd have to pull it back up exactly, but it's something to the effect of hard work and determination will determine how far you go, but your heart condition will determine the direction that you go in. And so I think that's a big deal, is even when Yeshua is saying that, hey, the prophet Isaiah was correct. These people hear but don't hear, they see but don't see, and so I speak to parables so they won't hear or see. He wasn't saying that as some sort of Gnostic, gnosis to the people that have been born into whatever. He did. The whole point of the Isaiah quote, if you look at that whole Isaiah section, is that the heart condition of these people is wrong. And so you have to be true inside of yourself, excuse me, to God, to Elohim, to others, and to yourself, or else you're going to be bent in some way incorrectly. That would be my spiel on the thing. You guys got anything, Allison or Norman?
Well, I think that if sometimes it's a salvation issue, like you said several weeks ago. Those are the things that you really, really, really have to ferret out and make sure that they are what you can understand. But anything that comes along that's not a salvation issue, I think you can have different points of view on it, and that it's not something to fight about. And that's what, the Jihad is all about, pretty much, is that we do come from different places and have different understandings of stuff, but the basics we're all united on. And I think that's an important thing to remember too, is that not everyone has ears to see ears to hear or eyes to see some things, and other people do. So it also helps to listen to what other people think about some of these things. Well, that's my 2 cents worth.
Sure. Yeah. And
you
I
got
think
2 cents to give us, Norman?
He might have stepped away. One thing too is that.
Sorry about that. No, I'm just listening in. I'm in agreement with quite a bit that you guys are talking about. There was one stage where I was a King James only person, but obviously, you learn and you want to know more. Some people don't want to know more. They're satisfied with that in their life, and that's it. But I want to know more. I want to know what the facts are. What is history teaching us? And this is where a lot of people fall down.
Yeah, I would agree. And it was the guy that got me started thinking about that. If you can mute your thing again, Norman, was a guy who had formerly been a Protestant Pentecostal pastor, and he had switched to the Syriac Orthodox Church, which is an interesting move. And he had some great sermons. He had a very sort of prophetic insight in a sense. And he had, he would talk about how he went from Pentecostalism into Syriac Orthodoxy, which is different than Eastern Orthodoxy, if you know the difference there. And he was, he held up a book once. It was called, I think I've got it over here, A Dictionary of Early Christian Beliefs, compiled by a guy named Burkett. And so I bought it and I was like, man, if we could figure out, because he had went back kind of to the 4th century and said this is where he landed. But I thought, man, if we could figure out what's going on between the 1st century and 325 AD, that would just be completely awesome. But then what I realized was even by 325, by 300, by 250, it was different than it was from 33 to 73. So that book was a valuable resource to get me on the path. And there are some great topics in there, but you can even see some of the early fathers in 225. They're already believing, Orthodox Catholic, non-Hebrew doctrines already. But it's just interesting to see the flow. And then that guy wrote some other books. Will the Real Heretics Please Stand Up? That's a good book. There's another one he wrote, which is a very interesting book because the guy is not a quote unquote Hebrew roots guy, but he writes a book called The Kingdom That Turned the World Upside Down. And he goes through the centuries and shows how there was groups of people within the Catholic proper church that broke away and got killed for their faith, basically. And they were getting glimpses. They don't have what we have. They don't have the internet. So some of their doctrines were just completely crazy, but they were trying to figure it out with limited resources, and they were getting killed. And, the Waldensians, which was kind of the worst thing. And it's very enlightening. It would be similar to, I know, Allison, you listened to the People of the Lie, that thing. And like I said on Facebook, man, the second half of that, if you guys could just listen to both of those. The first half was very interesting to me because I've been involved in that process before. Right. And there were many things that people were talking about exorcisms and different things that I had seen firsthand and I knew. Yeah. And it also brought up the questions about why does it take us so much more than it took Yeshua and the disciples. I want to figure that out too, so we could get better at it. But then the second part about group evil and the case study from Vietnam, and it Well, what it did, to be honest, and I know you guys don't know me, but I've always had a heart to like, why, because I'm in America, and I think everybody is except for Norman, why is it that we as, and I'm talking American church proper, whoever you are, Catholic, Christian, Hebrew roots, even Orthodox Judaism, why is it that in America we are so okay with abortion, for instance? Of course, we're individually against it, but as a group, I think it falls into the category of group evil that he was talking about, that we somehow, so like I would never, ever allow an abortion to happen in a room that I was in. I would die before I let that happen. But yet just down the road, there's abortions taking place. So there's almost this cognitive dissonance within the group that's saying we're okay that this is happening in our land, even though we're not okay with it. Just like those guys in Vietnam, they would have never went out and shot somebody by themselves, an innocent person, but the whole group, and then they flattened this village for just the most atrocious thing in the world. So I don't know. What are your thoughts, Allison?
I think what I particularly found disturbing is he talked about how, okay, you'd really get upset if you saw one dead body, but if you see thousands of dead bodies, it's like your mind conditions itself to accept that as normal or as acceptable, because you just can't deal with that sensory overload constantly, basically. So the issue with the abortion clinics, none of us like it, but we're just so used to it now. It's not appalling anymore. And this is evil. I wish that, we could all wake up to all the atrocities that happen every day, but we're just so bombarded by them. And I think that although, yes, we have the internet and it's wonderful because we can find out all kinds of really amazing stuff, you also see an awful lot of really horrible stuff. And I think it is dulling our moral senses down. And that's kind of bad. You have to be careful what you expose yourself to. But yeah, that guy's whole presentation was just amazing. But it really woke me up, especially the desensitization of the group, and how people just go, oh well, that's normal, it's all right. It's not. It's appalling. But and that could easily be manipulated by anything. We could be being controlled that way, in a way, and it's that's scary.
Absolutely. And I see your comment, Professor Smith. We are also powerless to stop it. And I would, we do feel powerless. And I think, but that's the point. I think that in the group, you get an individual who is not evil to do an evil thing because he feels powerless to stop it. Or if I try to stop this, then I will die also, especially in the Vietnam case. So I think that number one, it harkens back to the prophetic utterances in the Tanakh, where the priests of the land and the prophets of the land, or at least the priests of the land, are chided because they did not teach the people correctly, and they did not cause the people to stand up correctly. They treated them as a way to get rich rather than leading them to the right thing. So that falls on, in my mind, the leaders of the Christian, Catholic, Jewish, and even as far as I know, Muslim community is appalled by abortions as well. That's a very Western idea, and Muslims, with all their problems, are an Eastern thinking people. So this thing, we could have stopped it by not letting it gain traction. I was born only 2 years after, Roe versus Wade. So could I have done anything individually? No, but the people who are in my place could have, and then I could have, as a young minister, I could have done something. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, now that it's so big, now that it's such a monolithic thing, how do we do it? But it's no different than, when the king of Israel was worshiping Molech. And so then they're sacrificing babies into the fire for the god Molech. Everybody's doing it, supposedly. It's the thing to do. and you've got some family over here that doesn't want to do it, but yet feels powerless to stop it, Yahweh still required of them that they stand up. And so I think that that we needed to do something. So what is that? I'm praying about it. I don't know. I've reached out to some different organizations here in Oregon. I gave them some ideas because, man, Oregon is so progressive as far as abortion goes. Abortion was legal in Oregon before 1973, believe it or not. So in the late 60s, abortion was legal, and they have been really on the forefront of pushing it. Well, the different organizations, I'm just a very frank and logical guy. If we're getting our butts kicked, let's just say we're getting our butts kicked, and let's change tactics. But even within these pro-life groups, there's so much politics and there's so many things going on that I gave them a whole presentation. I sat down with the president. I said, boom, 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 boom. This is what, if you want to gain traction, keep from getting your butt kicked each and every time, this is what you will do. And it wasn't received well. It just was not received well, because I challenged that they were doing a good job. And I'm not challenging their heart. I know these are good people who have committed their lives to this, and a lot of them have done even more than I have for against it. So I think there was a little bit of pride factor there, and I can be pretty straightforward. So but to me, it's like if somebody's got an idea that's going to say, it's like David going to fight Goliath. He's got the idea. Why are you mad at it? Just let him go do his thing, because I want to live and not die. So to me, that's how I think. But I think that's probably less common. Well, I
think that was the reaction you got was possibly because you went outside of the box of the way of their thinking, and that offends people. So, but maybe that's what we need to do sometimes.
Well, yeah, and their thinking is losing. That's the whole point. I'm not trying to challenge a system just because to challenge it. If it's working good, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it's broke and we're pretending like it's okay, let's blow it up and start over, because it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. Why, anyway. So I don't know how we got off on all this, but I think it's good in the sense that that brings up another point too. Like you were saying, we have the internet, we have different things going on, and we can study and research and different things, and we can get our correct doctrine, and my doctrine is better than Professor Smith's, and his is better than mine. And we've got everything just perfect and all of this, but it really doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I think I've got things figured out. He thinks he's got things figured out, but guess what? We could have our neighbor that's starving and we're not feeding him. Well, then we don't get it. We don't get it. So, and I'm just looking, going, okay, where I was thinking today, I need to call because I've got a home group here we do, and we've got a fund with some money, and we haven't spent any in a while. So I was going to call the police chief and say, hey, give me a family that's really hurt. Just, show me where they are. And my nonprofit will come and just bless them. So we can get so caught up in Americanism and materialism. But what we don't realize for people like us is we can get so caught up in, what does chapter 4 of the book of First Enoch mean? You know what I mean? It's the same diversion. Not that I don't want to study the 4th chapter of Enoch. I really do. But that can be an idol in and of itself to figure this stuff out, rather than do what the Deuteronomy 18 prophet tells you. Do what he tells you. What does he ask every time for about eternal life? What is his answer? Do the commandments. Do good works. Love Yah, love others. Over and over again, that's what he says. And so, I just think that with all of the stuff that you can study in this genre, getting back to making sure I'm doing good works is often overlooked. I don't know if you guys disagree. Thoughts?
No, I agree. You can get so far down the rabbit trail that you forget to come up for air and to see what's going on around you and help people who need help, and I'm guilty of that a lot. So I always have to make an effort to look around and see what needs fixing and what needs doing, so I can walk out the walk I'm supposed to do. But you do sometimes just have to get out of your little cave and look around.
I see.
I think there's people that are better at that than others. You know, there's people that are very good at they're outgoing, they're extroverts, and their ministries a lot of times has to do with planting seeds in people that they meet. You know, spiritual seeds that you hope will grow. And then there's people perhaps that sort of work more inside the congregation that's already developed. They water. They develop the plant that has already started germinating and growing. They water it. So there's people that plant and there's people that water. And I think Paul makes reference to that. But I think you're right about a lot of those things, Rich, especially the basics of getting out and looking around you to see where the need is. That's important. It made me think of that verse in Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mankind, what is good, and what does Yahuwah require of you, but to act justly, to love devotion, and to walk humbly with your Elohim.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. Some people do have certain gifts that are better than others, and there's certain things that you can do that other people can't do. But I would also caution, like we were talking about at the beginning, just because, you know, that's not my gift, I'm not going to look at that and go, hey, I'll pray for you, brother, be blessed and be filled, but not give you any food. You know what I mean? Like it says in James, even if I'm not the best at it, but nobody else is around to do it, then I've got to try to do something. It reminds me of when I heard a sermon preached once when, you know, Yeshua walks up on the tree and there's no fruit in it, you know, there's no fruit on it. And, you know, he kind of, the pastor, I don't even remember who it was at this point. He kind of made a joke about it, but made it light, but he was making the point. It says, this tree was placed there by the creator of the universe, and he planned it out before time began, because he knew that Yeshua was going to be walking by and wanted a piece of fruit. And that tree didn't have any fruit on it. And he says, you know what? I don't care if you're an apple tree. You better squeeze out a banana or something when Yeshua walks by and needs a piece of fruit, because you were placed there in that spot for that very thing and you didn't produce. And so what does he have to do? He's just going to chop you down and throw you in the fire. Why? Because you're useless. It does that's not even talking about eternal flames or anything. That means if I have a tree that's not producing, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to go take the axe to it. I'm going to chop it down and I'm going to use it for firewood. Because of logic, not because of any sort of anything. It's just logical that the Father would do that. And he, you know, he's given us the example that that's what we would do with a tree. So it's just any way that I can start producing. And I've noticed too, and there's been times in my life when I've done this more and done it less. You know, when you're praying, Father, I used to run a route a lot. And so it was, Father, put somebody in my way that I can give them something. I can do something for them, or I can help them out. And you know what? If he trusts you to follow through with your word, he'll send all kinds of people to you, because he's looking for harvesters who will go out and who will do this. And so there's plenty of people seemingly from that quote there that they're ripe unto harvest. Like if they just had a little bit of directive. We call them goy dogs because they don't know what's valuable and what's not. And here there's a few of them that just need a little bit of mental and spiritual construct in order for them to stop being dogs and start to be children of the King. And Norman, Allison, Professor Smith, myself, all of us here have enough in us to give some people a construct to help them out. None of us are perfect, but by far, out of these four, and I would say 99% of the people in the Yahad think tank have enough in them. Yes, sir.
The challenges that I have found in the past is a lot of people don't want your help. Leave me alone. You know, I can do it by myself. Thank you very much. Get lost. I'm not interested in your theology, not interested in your belief system. Go away. And that's the challenge. And with the result, I think a lot of people encounter that and they give up on that.
No, yes. And I would say two things to that, and I agree with you. A lot of people don't want it. Two things. Number one is when Yeshua sent them out 2 by 2, he said, give them shalom. And if they do not receive it, receive your shalom back, wipe the dust off your feet and move forward. So if you've made the presentation and they haven't received it, then their blood is not on your hands. Secondly is, and I think we all would fall into this trap, but even in the verbiage that you used, they don't want your theology, et cetera, et cetera. I think we can package it a little bit different. We are so used to theology, and we're so used to the way, the terminology. Sometimes when you're speaking, it sounds like Chinese to somebody when you're talking about, I won't even go into some of the different ideas, but any Christian topics, and we have certain verbiage for them and certain things, and then they go back to when they were forced to go to Catholic church, and they're out of there. You know what I mean? So there's nothing religious per se about following the moral commandments in the 10 Commandments. There's nothing religious about saying it's good not to murder. Don't do it. There's nothing religious about saying it's good not to commit adultery. Don't do it. There's nothing religious about saying if all of us abide by a certain basic form of good works, then our society as a whole is going to be better and it's going to thrive. So a lot of times you could backdoor them a little bit in just presenting it as a moral construct rather than a religious one. That would be my thoughts. Allison?
That's what I do. That's exactly the way that I approach people. You know, anybody, you never can do something good for somebody and do wrong. What they take of that is up on them. Say somebody missed their bus and they needed a ride home at night from where I work. I'll give them a ride home, you know, and if I have a chance to talk to them about anything after they see how I treat other people and how I live my walk, you know, not that I'm perfect or anything by far, not, but I'm pretty conscientious. I try to do the best that I can, and I try to help people, whoever they are and whatever they need. And then they see that and they might ask me, what's this thing around my neck? You know, or I could say, how, you know, I say, well, my holy day is Saturday, and they'll go, huh? And you can talk to them then, but you have to show them what you're like first, you know, show them that you're worth listening to. To me, that's important.
Yeah, I would agree. And we, you know, we've done so much studying and so much praying and all of this. We know that, hey, we put time in this, and it's a little different, you know. If I go to the mechanic because I can't fix something, and if he's got a good reputation and I look him up on Google and he's got 4.5 stars, then I don't question him when he tells me, hey, it's all messed up. Because why? Because he's got a certificate, he's got a business, and, you know, and so we just go, okay, how much is it going to be? Don't kill me. You know, and we take it for granted. But with us, we're not looked at that way, even though we have the same or better qualifications than that mechanic. So sometimes we presuppose that they should just, you know, believe us because we are doing good and we have the yes. And it's not purposely like that, but it can, you know, it can come through just like a mechanic can be prideful that he's the best mechanic. And was it C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity that talks about pride as the sneakiest sin? Because it can attach to anything. It can attach to other sins. It can attach to other good works. You know, you can be prideful about doing the works of Yeshua. So, and then you're sinning, you know, so, but yeah, so I think that, and Job talks about that. Job, one verse in Job, and this isn't the correct quote. This is going to be a little stronger than it says it, but it's kind of bringing up the point of wherever there is any study, there is an uplifted spirit, and that could be uplifted spirit like in a good way, or it could be a prideful spirit. Why? Because you put time in and you've done it. And any vision or any studying, if I'm coming to you and saying, hey, Professor Smith and Allison and Norman, let me show you this thing that you are thinking wrong. That in itself is a forward way. That can very easily be a prideful way. It's at the very least, it means I think I'm right and you're wrong, right? Yes, sir.
Yes, that I was guilty of that with my previous association pertaining to the calendar. I approached them and I told them that they were wrong. and it was downhill from there. Oh boy, what a mess.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I agree with Allison earlier that, I wrote a response. I don't know how many of you got the email from Jackson about, hey, this is what happened and we had to kick some people out and blah, 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 blah. So I was thinking about doing a Yahad statement, and here's the statement. What do you think about it? I don't know if you guys got that or not. Well, I got it. And I just went down the list. And one of the things I put was in that is we've got to decide what is salvific, like what of the things we're holding to, what is it? Is it a certain belief in certain things? And if so, what are those? Or is it doing certain things? Or, what is that? Which is why I think that we got to follow Yeshua here in his word specifically, because it's a slippery slope if you're just picking and choosing. But we have to decide, hey, do I feel like you can gain eternal life and be on a different calendar than me? I think you can. I like the simplicity of the calendar that's used by the Yahad. I love it. And I was already thinking that way anyway. And then when I saw the presentation of it, I thought, yeah, this is very Enochian, which I liked, and different things. But I'm not mad at my brother that's doing the Hallel calendar. I know for sure that that's the wrong date. But I don't know for sure that what I'm doing is the right date. But I'm not mad at him. And if he invites me over to his thing, I'm still going to do my thing, but I'm probably going to go hang out at his too, because he's a brother and he's trying to love Yah and love others. So, but obviously this group that you were involved in, it was a pretty strong, they felt like you needed to be on their calendar. And so it was very high up on the salvific scale in a sense for them. If not, maybe, Norman, you can have eternal life if you don't do our calendar, but maybe.
Yes, well, when I approached him, and this is going back a few years ago now, maybe 5, maybe more, and it took me years to come to that conclusion, and that's when I approached the group and I said, you're wrong, and like I said, it went downhill from there. But today, what I know today, obviously my approach would be extremely different. I would approach it, the brethren, from a different mindset, and but that's just from life and experience and learning, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. You do something. I've done stuff wrong enough so many times that finally you stop getting burned by the fire in a sense. So, yeah, I agree. Experience helps, which is even while, I do appreciate Dr. Snyder, and, I can say something I'm thinking or whatever, and then he's got like 5 references off the top of his head from obscure texts, and he's like, well, it can't be right because blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. So I don't always just like fold to what he says, but I want to go back there and then research those things and go, hey, he was right, or hey, maybe he missed this here or whatever. So the idea that you have someone who's studied and or even in a group like this where iron sharpens iron, where I can say, hey guys, this is right, and then you guys are all looking at me sideways like normally most of the time when you're in a group of 5 or more and everybody says you're wrong, then you're probably wrong. You could be right, but you're probably wrong. So yeah, that just comes with experience. We got a family here that we hang out with that are real close friends, like family, and all our kids are the same ages and stuff. And we play Foursquare because we got boys that are 8 and 9, and we play Foursquare with them. And man, it's so funny how when one of those boys gets out, they have a reason why they shouldn't be out. No, that was on the line. No, you held the ball. No. And everybody else is going, no, that's not what happened. And that little 9-year-old boy believes it. I mean, they are not lying. They believe that ball was on the line. And you just have to kick them out, and they're so frustrated because they got to wait 45 seconds till they get back in the game, but what a life. But yeah. And so I think there is that, as you're growing up, and to be honest, to my own shame and maybe to some of yours, that is so who's doing that the most? My 9-year-olds through my 14-year-olds are doing that the most. So when I'm 30 and I'm acting that way, that means I'm acting like a prepubescent adolescent. How's that for a blow to the pride? That's where it is. That's why even what he was talking about in People of the Lie, going back to that with the exorcism, and talking about how, if there needs to be an actual exorcism, it also means there's some psychological things going on. So it could be classified medically, but then there can possibly be demonic things going on, or maybe there's not, and it's just medical. But regardless, these people had stopped growing. So then once they got the demon exorcised, they went into psychology, to psychiatry, and they made so many steps way faster. In 10 years, they hadn't grown as much because that demon was now gone. And now in 6 months, they've grown more than they grew in 10 years. But they realized, I am 12 years old because this demon entered me at 12. So I think like I'm 12. There was no growth from here on out. And it doesn't have to be a demon. If a traumatic thing has happened to us, or if we have went to a place that's very prideful where we're not going to learn anything from everybody, then our mental and psychological growth stops there. That's why you see some people who maybe have had something bad happen to them at a certain age. They act like that age, but they're 30. But I think we can do that too. We can respond in certain ways, maybe not as extreme as someone with a documented mental illness, but I think everybody has certain areas in their life where there's at least markers of that going on. But I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe I just have those markers.
No, we're all there. Or I can't speak for the other two, but I'm there. What I also, in that People of the Lie, what was interesting was the person themselves has to agree to let go. So, and you could see that as, a mental or a demonic thing either way. You can't get past some things until you're ready to let go of it. And, I don't see how, if, you were demon ridden or whatever you want to call it, possessed, how you wouldn't want that to go away. But evidently, I guess the demon threatens you, that says he's going to kill you if you try to take him out or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, or you're so used to him being there. He convinced you to allow. See, you have to give him permission to come in, just like you've got to want it to go out. So, hey, they've treated you wrong. I will treat you right. That sort of thing. And so you're the old saying, the hand you hold is the hand that holds you down. It's that idea. Or it could be a threatening thing, but yeah, I agree. It's interesting that, and I think it's apropos that you have to say, and in exorcisms, you have to get the person to say, I reject this, I want this out, I accepted you at one point, which is why I go back to, we don't see Yeshua doing that. So what was he doing that we don't know? You know what I mean? It's just coming out immediately. There, or at least within the hour or something like that. He sends them away, and within that hour they get healed or whatever. Could be the thing. But in the Greek, it's not demon possession or demon oppression or this. It's just the word that means demonize. They are demonized. So whether, you can get into the theological talk of, is it in them, on them, or around them? Who cares? They're demonized, and it's having an influence on them. And so we need to get that influence out of their life. So I like to use that word demonize because that's the word we have in the Greek. And then it takes away any theological argument that somebody could have, can a Christian be demon possessed, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they can be demonized. They can be getting influenced by a demon and not know it. So anyway, or maybe they do know it. So, all right. Well, anything else? We're coming up on the hour here. Anything else, or any questions or comments on what we had talked about thus far?
No, I really want to thank you. That these things that the Yahad's been doing for the past several Shabbats never end up the way you envisioned them, but they're good. They're really good, or at least I think so. But maybe that's because my brain is sort of lateral, But it was. Thank you so much. It was really good.
Yeah. This didn't go where I thought it would go either. I don't know how we went from last week's topics to People of the Lie to group evil and abortion to trying to talk to somebody and they don't give you credit for what you know, but you're just trying to help. We went all over the place. So hopefully everybody, if they see it on YouTube.
That's kind of the point of the forum, though. It goes according to the needs of the people that are inquiring or thinking about things.
Or just where the rock will take it, that too. It's cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm going to, anybody have anything else they want to say? I'm going to shut it down if not.
One thing, if I can, respective of the wheat and the tares, applicable to the text, what I thought was, as you were talking about that, is it could apply, some people, they think that Paul's writings are not legitimate. Some people think that this certain group of writings is not legitimate. It could apply in that way in the minds of people, perhaps, that this is a tear that was slipped in textually, in order to test us.
Oh.
And so that's an interesting perspective. I've never heard that before. Usually it's applied on an interpersonal level, but I could see that. I could see that there's legitimacy to that idea, and it's very possible because even from the side of people that believe that Paul was legitimate, you look at how his writings have been misused. I'm talking within the realm of people who accept him. They believe, and if they accept the Torah too, then they have to believe that the prevailing interpretation of Paul that's bandied around in the churches today is wrong. It's a misuse within that group. You see, you understand. But I just wanted to give some feedback on that point. It's very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And but I'm very careful because it's one of the, a lot of the parables aren't explained, but it's one that is explained. And so when Yeshua explains it, he says the wheat are the people, the children of the kingdom, and then the evil one sows his evil children. So I want to be very careful because we already know it doesn't say that it's the words, but if you take that to an extension, like you're saying, that is very plausible, which I agree, which is why I brought it up, is that the children have words and use these words, and they're going to come from the perspective of the evil one or of the kingdom of heaven. So yes, so in extension, I that's why I threw it out there, and you're seeing the possible validity in that. But again, that's not exactly what the explanation says, although I think by extension it is.
Very good. All right, thank you guys so much, and I'm gonna shut this down. See y'all on the internet sometime soon. Thanks.